our courses now have to have video and explanations on exactly what we're talking about rather than describing it in words. The education system is really bad. That's why I was saying back in the 80s and 90s, you could take a person and put them through courses, and at the end of it, wow, they'd be able to roof pretty well. Today, not so much. You kind of keep your eyes and ears open for opportunities, and when they present themselves, you've got to go, okay, well, will this fit, or is it going to take me down a rabbit hole?
This is something that I learned this year as well, that you cannot be everything to everyone. You can be just something to someone. And if you do that, the right person will find you.
What happens is you get some bad jobs and they'll never hire you again. But if you just keep your name out there in everybody's face, you'll just keep on getting new clients, even if you've got all these bad ones stacked up. A lot of these immigrants, illegal immigrants, are actually helping our country to a degree.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Roofing Millionaires podcast, the only roofing podcast where we don't promote anyone and we don't sell you anything. In this episode, we are sitting down with John Chen from the Durable Slate Company in Georgia. If you are in the roofing industry, there is no chance that you don't know him, since he is one of the most respected gentlemen in the industry. So do share and like this video if you learn anything from John's wisdom. Let's dive in. We had this conversation in our podcast in season 1 as well. The first question that I want to ask you is, in 11 or 10 months, what do you feel has been changed in your inside and your surroundings?
It's been kind of several fold. I guess it depends on what area of our company. So about a year ago this time, we acquired Bain and Irvine in Scotland. So we've implemented certain systems there, and we've roughly doubled in size. So that's one thing that we've done, and we've done things to make ourselves a little bit more visible there. Here in the U.S., what we've done is we've tried to codify things a lot more so that there's less mistakes. And also, my nephew recently started in the company, so he's learning a lot of the ropes. So codifying things makes things simpler to learn.
And is there anything else as well that you learned specifically that you feel that you did not know, or that you needed to learn, or that this year taught you specifically?
When I think about it, one of the things that I didn't quite realize was that a lot of the knowledge that I have as far as the specifics of slate and tile, that I thought a lot of the people within our company knew that. And so I'm actually starting to make some videos of different aspects. Just to give you an example, yesterday I was in Little Rock and I came across this certain type of tile. So I took a video of it and explained where it came from, when it was produced, how I know exactly where it came from, and the process used in making it. This clay tile roof was installed in the 1920s, and it was a Ludwig tile. Ludwig had 5 plants back in the day. It had Alfred, New York, Ludwig, Georgia, Coffeyville, Kansas, Chicago Heights, and New Lexington. And just looking at the clay and looking at the time, I pretty much know where that came from. And I explained why I knew that in the video and the process of making that tile. So that tile's something called fire flashed. So in fire flashing, what they do is this is back in the day, when they put the tiles into the kiln, they either put gas in the kiln, or they'll take a brush and they'll brush the tile with manganese or certain types of chemicals that will burn hotter, and it'll make the individual tile have varying colors within the tile itself. So the border might be very brown, and the middle might be red or orange, and it'll make every single tile a little different. And so I was making a video about the process and where all these came from and et cetera. Because times, like when I talk, I just say, well, it's fire flash and blah, blah, blah. And I get these looks and I'm like, "Do you not know what that is?" And then I'd explain it. So all these old tiles, whether they're from Ludwisi or B. Mifflin Hood or Mineral Wells, Mound City, etc., they all had their own distinct ways to identify it, identify where it came from, identify the process that made it, so that you can actually either find replacement tiles or ask Ludwisi to replicate it if they can. As I was rattling things off, I just noticed that nobody was really following. I guess through time, I've accumulated a lot of this data and we talk about it, but different people are in different positions these days. Even though we have so many people that have been here 10, 15, 20. Gosh, we just had a guy hit this 30-year mark recently.
Mhm.
A lot of these guys have kind of progressed on. So Ryan, the guy that runs Columbus Production, he just hit his 30-year mark. Back in the day, he was out in the field, soldering or installing roofs, and over time he became a foreman and then a general superintendent, and now he runs all of production. Well, he's not on the roof anymore, so a lot of these roofers that I talk to kind of like a deer in headlights. So I realized that I've got to go back and make videos, because way back in the day, one of the things that we realized that we had to do was an intensive training program. So I wrote a lot of courses, how to identify slate, how to identify tile, how to repair a slate, how to fix a slate if it's hard to get out, how to flash a chimney, how to do all these basic things on a roof. But today's society, it's a little bit difficult to have people go through courses with the written word. So we're starting to make videos now so that people can actually see while they're learning. And I think it's a much better thing. So that would be a step of what have we learned? We've learned that our courses don't work as well as they did back in the early 90s, that our courses now have to have video and explanations on exactly what we're talking about rather than describing it in words.
Thank you for sharing that. And I agree with you. And I call this thing the knowledge curse, because when we think that we know something, or when we know something, we assume that the other person knows this thing as well. And
Right.
that is where we just confuse it. And the good thing is that you are using a method that is like the way for the future. I call it the camcorder method. Like, you have the camera and you just record yourself doing it, and you let the other person watch it and learn. And if they have any questions, they can learn from you. Last time when we had this conversation on our podcast, it was a good conversation. And before this interview, I sat down, I rewatched that podcast, and I figured out like what made that conversation so special to you, for me, and for the people who liked that. And I figured out that somewhere the questions were not particularly about roofing. They were like individuals. And as humans, we need those kind of questions as well, or those kind of answers from people like you, because you have been there, you have done that, and now you are in a position to guide others or to tell others that this is how the future looks like, or this is how the other side looks like. That is why you also mentioned that people nowadays are in different positions. And I agree with you on that as well. And the purpose of this conversation is today, like, I have a few questions where we are going to talk about craftsmanship, like why we are missing that these days. And you are someone who has been on the both sides, like you have been in the 90s and the 80s, where you have seen people that they were mad about their craftsmanship or the craft that they produced. And now you are here as well, where you are dealing with Gen Z, and they care more about money maybe, or something else, or status. So we are in a situation where a lot of things are happening, and if we can show people the right direction, I think that will be a lot of good to this world overall. Why do you feel that people nowadays are in different positions? I agree, but like if we go back 20 or 30 years, or like 4 or 5 decades, I know people, or I have heard that this pen was made by someone who was mad for his craft or her craft. But nowadays we don't see people who do things just for the madness of doing absolute perfect work. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a overall degeneration of society, to be honest. So if you look at society, go back 50 years, go back 100 years, things were tougher. If you go back, say to the 1800s, it took a lot to work hard enough just to get the bare minimum food on the table. Fast forward, go into the early 1900s, it wasn't as hard. You didn't have to maybe go out and, shoot a deer or a bear or whatever, but, it was still difficult. And then fast forward into later on in the 1900s, um, you had the Depression, you had World War, well, 1 and 2, you had the Korean War. You had a lot of different things that made life pretty difficult. So people were very industrious and they worked hard. And there was a certain honor in the crafts, and people were driven to basically just get some food on the table and have shelter. And as things eased up, people tend to get a little lazy. And then you look at all the other things that have happened within society. Drugs have become rampant, going from marijuana to heroin, cocaine, fentanyl, and everything else. People are looking for a release of the difficulties, and it wasn't so prevalent in the past where it's so prevalent now. And so you've got people taking all kinds of drugs, and not just street drugs. There's also psychiatric drugs. Every single mass shooting, if you look at what happened, the mass shooter was on psychiatric drugs. Every single one,
Hmm.
bar none. You've got the food supply. What's happened is back in the day, what did they cook with? Lard, bacon grease, butter. They ate whole foods. My mother had a huge garden. We ate all fresh vegetables. Even though we grew up really poor, we had fresh fruits and vegetables because our backyard was full of fruit trees and a huge garden. And when people ate whole foods and didn't consume all of this junk and consume drugs, the bodies were in better shape. If you take a look at a beach, a picture of a beach, say in 1960, 1970, everybody was thin. Now, most of the people, especially here in the United States, they're obese or overweight. And people really battle to stay slim. I mean, like, I try and eat pretty healthy, but I'm not slim, and it's because when I travel, lots of things are cooked with seed oils. You've got all kinds of just junk in the food, even trying to eat healthy. So you've got the food supply, you've got the drugs, and you've got the education system. The education system is really bad. That's why I was saying back in the 80s and 90s, you could take a person and put them through courses, and at the end of it, wow, they'd be able to roof pretty well. Today, not so much. I mean, you really, really have to be selective, put it that way. Back then, you could just almost hire anybody, train them up, and boom, as long as they stick with it, they're pretty good. Nowadays, you've got to hire the cream of the crop, and work with them, and they'll become that good. But that's not true across society, because a lot of society has had so many misunderstood words that they've gone past and they kind of go blank. It's kind of like if you ever read something and you get to the bottom of the page and you go, hey, what did I just read? Well, you went by some word that you didn't fully understand. When you do that a lot, you get really hazy and you can't really study very well. But if you were to look up all your words and study correctly, you can really actually study any subject and be a master at it. People have asked me, is like, how do you know so much about, slate or tile or copper roofing? I said, well, I've studied it. I've talked to people. I've had people ask me about my travels. Like, gosh, you travel all over the place. I'm like, a lot of it is work related, and a lot of it, I really try and talk to people from all over the world that do what we do. And it's really interesting because you can find little tidbits from people all over the world, and they can be right in your backyard. I've learned all kinds of little tricks from guys that really might not be great roofers, but they knew this one thing, and you're like, wow, that's pretty interesting. And to be able to take different aspects from different people and put your best foot forward, that's pretty vital. But as far as your question, what's changed in the society, it's mainly those things. You've got the work ethic going so far out, and it's because of the drugs and education system, and so you get this overall laziness that instead of doing something productive and getting like, wow, they'd rather just sit around and maybe play video games. And sure, that's fun, but how long can you play video games? Some people do it for long periods of time. I guess to me, the most interesting things that I do is where I set out a goal and I achieve the goal. And that's where a person really achieves, for me at least, happiness. It's like, because you set out a goal and there's all these unknown barriers, and you're headed towards the finish line, and then you get sideswiped and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. I didn't see that coming. And then you go, okay, well, this is how I'm going to fix that. And then you start marching towards your goal again, and then something else happens. And every time you navigate yourself to overcome those barriers and you get to that goal, you're like, yes, I did it. You have a feeling of accomplishment, of true happiness. I think that through social media, people like to paint pictures of laying on a beach with their, I don't know, their Rolex watches or their Breitling watches, and they're sipping a Mai Tai and they're not doing anything, that's fun. And it probably is for a little while, but it gets pretty boring. I think to me, happiness is overcoming those obstacles and attaining your goals. And society has just changed so much.
And that is such a beautiful answer, by the way, John. The beautiful thing about life is we don't know what happens at the end, because if we knew what happens during the process or at the end, then everything will become so boring and we'll have no interest or no thrill about anything. Let's just say that I live in 16th century. Now I don't have media. I have to do more hard work to actually put food on the table, and I have more danger to be killed as well. Like anyone can kill me for anything and no one would know. Like now everything is covered by media or social media. My life is more endangered than today. But now I am living in ease in 21st century. I have social media. I have to do less work and I have less pressure as well on me. So why would someone, like, by what you are saying, what I am getting is that 16th century was harder than 20, but still people take drugs now, but not back then where they were supposed to take drugs or go at this path, because back then life was more difficult. So they did not escape at that point where everything was difficult. Why are humans escaping or finding the escape route today?
Well, they're much more available today. I mean, certainly back in your day, you had your really, really heavy drinkers. And that's kind of how prohibition came about, because there were so many heavy drinkers. But it's much more prevalent today. It's not just alcohol. You've got marijuana, heroin, Molly. I don't even know all the drugs. Sometimes somebody says something and you're like, what are you talking about? And they're like, it's a drug. And you're like, okay. It's like, that's a new thing to me. So I don't know what they all are, but they're fantastically broad now and very, very accessible.
Okay. And how do you feel that this thing, let's just talk about roofing or construction, if we talk about our industries, I feel that there are two kind of personalities here. One are the artists, like people who want to do the best work, and one are like businessmen kind of people who want to maybe do the best transactions. So how can we turn this an artist into a businessman, or do you feel that these two things cannot coexist?
They certainly can coexist. I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by a businessman. If you look at, say, roofing, I would say that if you're just looking at bottom line dollar, your best bets are probably to be like a storm chasing insurance type company or a large commercial flat company. I think profit wise, that's where you would make the most money. As far as like artistry, I think the old crafts, whether they be slate, clay tile, sheet metal, old crafts, those roofs are probably the most artistic. But you can also make a business out of that rather than just being an artist. But the difference is that, your artisan, he wants to work with his hands and he wants to fix what is right in front of his face and make it beautiful. Everybody's a little different. Some people, that's what they want to do. Other people, they might want to sell. That's their thing. They like talking to people, they like meeting people, they like the challenge of working through problems to get contracts signed. And or another person might like to arrange things, and when I say arrange things, I mean being like a really good administrator, like, okay, well, I can assemble this group of people here to do this. So it kind of depends on the person as far as what they like to do. And because people have asked me that, it's like, how do you get from being a hands-on roofer to being a company owner and managing all these people? And what I say is you should actually select the thing that you like to do and hire the rest. So if you like being the roofer, you hire the general manager, you hire the salespeople, and you just, work in production. If you like to sell, you would move yourself over to sales and hire the rest, or form a partnership with somebody that can do the rest. The main thing is you should do the thing that you love. You shouldn't be trying to run a company if you like working with your hands and making the products. You shouldn't be working on the roof if that's not what you like to do. So I think that person really has to find out what they love to do and do that thing, and then hire or partner with everybody else within an organization. And that's a thing that a lot of people don't understand, what creates an organization. A
Mhm.
lot of people, I get these comments sometimes on my posts. Oh my gosh, you have the most amazing roofers. Where do
Mhm.
you find such people that do such great work? But you'll notice a lot of my posts talk about the team, because it takes an entire team. You take a look at a project like, I remember the first project where we won the international award was Steeple Square. And people were saying, how did you find so many great sheet metal men to do that job? And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, we do. We absolutely do. But the two most valuable people didn't do, well, I shouldn't say didn't do the installing, didn't do much of the installing. So, Michelle, who was running production at the time and ran that project, she didn't install anything, but she had to make sure that the schedules were exactly perfect, that the scaffolding went up at the exact time, because we had an 8-month window. After 8 months in Iowa, you can't work up there. And if you have to go into the next year, you're going to have to pay rental on that scaffold all through the winter to get back there. So it had to be done, no fail, by a certain time. And so everything had to work like clockwork. And so you've got to have somebody running and making sure that every single thing happens when it's supposed to happen. If you have a situation where all of a sudden 4 of your guys get sick, your top guys, they're all out with a flu for a week. You've gotta compensate for that. The crane or the scaffold isn't on time, you've gotta account for that. No matter what it is, you've gotta account for that. And then if you look at our superintendent, Jason, who's fabulous working with his hands, he did a more incredible job of running the guys because that steeple's so tall. You've got guys working on all different levels, and you've gotta keep track of it, you know? And you've gotta keep track of every single little thing because a lot of those things were made in our shop or another shop, and they went up. And if you made a mistake, well, now you need a new piece. That's a problem because you can't make a piece super fast and you're moving upwards. So now you've held up everybody. The management of that job is was much, much, much more difficult than the actual installation, which was very difficult because it was so decorative and ornate. So you need a whole team. So in any organization, you're going to basically have 7 parts or 7 divisions within an organization, and that's vital to any organization.
Right.
So you've got your executive division, and basically they run everything. They write the
Okay.
program. They make sure that everything's legal. They make sure that you've got licensing, permits, your safety is on point. Everything about the organization is legal, your finances, your bonding, all of that is legal. And the we call that division 7. And then your first division is actually your communications division. It takes in
Okay.
all of the communications, does all of your hiring, keeps all of your files for your personnel, and any one division can blow up a company and make it great or decimate it. So within division 1, if you handle all of your communications and your hiring really well and you only hire top-notch guys and you immediately fire anybody that isn't a fit, you create a really good solid base to develop off of. Right? Your second division does the sales. Well, if your
Okay.
salesmen are just really, really great at communicating and selling, your company can explode. But if they waste all of the leads, you have the exact opposite. And then in your third division, that's your treasury guys, So when they get that sold contract from sales, they lay it all out and they have everything ordered and whatnot. And they make sure that you're getting the best price at everything and making sure that everything is accounted for and you're not making any bad payments and you're making sure that everybody's paying. And then your production division, well, all the jobs are scheduled right. All the crews are where they're supposed to be and they're all, working on all cylinders and getting the jobs done. And then your fifth division, which is quality control, they do all of the training and all the inspections. So every single job that we do, somebody from quality control goes out and inspects the job and they try and flunk it. And if they flunk it, well, they grab the person that did the job or the foreman or whatever, and they say, okay, so this failed. Okay. So the reason why I'm flunking this job is whatever it is. You left a bunch of trash in the gutters. How'd that happen? And they make sure that that doesn't happen again. And also within that division, they do that training. So like I said, we have all these courses that I wrote way back in the day. Well, like I said, I think we have to do a revamp of that. I think we have to start doing videos, and I've been starting to do those, especially on some of my times when I go out and do inspections, because I can really show, like, okay, this is what's wrong, okay, and then another video of this is how we do it. Okay, this is what's wrong. This is how we do it. So you can visually see what's right and what's wrong. And that was how I got to writing those courses because way, way long time ago, when I was first in the company, one of the main things I did was I salvaged material. So I would do slate tear offs and tile tear offs, and we'd salvage the material for reuse. And I would be able to see all these roofs. I mean, one after another, after another, after another, how long things lasted, why they failed, why certain things work better than others. And so I've got like, I don't even know how many, probably over 1,000 roofs I've torn off where I've seen this is pretty interesting. They did this, that no good, and that's how I was able to develop a lot of the courses by seeing what worked and what failed. So in Division 5, we really try and instill that of this is what goes on here and this is why things fail. So that's Division 5. And then Division 6 is our PR,
Right.
so we promote our good works. So ideally, just that divisions 1 through 6, it spins like a top. So when it hits Division 6, they promote it and get another job and it goes to Division 1. They take the estimate call, it goes to Division 2, they sell it. Division 3 gets all the financial stuff together and the material straight. Division 4 gets it all organized, ready to go, gets the crew out. Division 5 checks the job, passes, goes to Division 6, booms. Division 7 is there to make Divisions 1 through 6 spin like a top and spin as fast as possible. And so that's what I was saying before about how sometimes you get something blindsides you, and that's where Division 7 is there to fix all of those hiccups. It's like, okay, well, we didn't realize that blah blah blah. So that's the whole idea of an organization, is that an organization is much much more than installing pieces of slate or pieces of tile. An organization is a living entity and it should spin like a top. And if it doesn't spin like a top, there's something wrong within the organization and you've got to go back and fix it.
Beautiful. You mentioned one thing that this is how things are done here, and everyone who wants to be part of your team or your organization need to know that this is how we want to do things. And you developed all of that like 20 or 30 years back. Now you are just changing that, or you are improving that. I agree, and I really like all of this. And this is what I call a simplest definition of a brand. Like brand X believes that the world will be a better place if Y happens. And for you, the X is your company and the Y is that your way of doing roofs. Now, the question I have, John, is that I can clearly see that you are so clear about the worldview that you want to have and where you want to take your organization, and the vision you have for your roofs, for your people, for your company or organization, and for the world overall. Do you feel that to attract the right kind of people, just you mentioned that so many people ask that how do you get so many good roofers or good employees? So do you feel that to attract the right kind of talent, the owner or the founder of the company, just like you, should have a clear worldview of what he actually wants to achieve and how he wants things to be, so the right people can automatically see that, okay, this is the mission that this guy wants to create or wants to achieve. And if we have to be part of it, okay, if we don't understand this, we can easily back out.
Yeah, of course. So basically, it's part of your branding. So your brand, what you want to put out there and show everybody that you are. Those are the kinds of people that you want to attract, right? So uh, at Durable, we want guys that, they work hard. It's not like a picnic, but what you get out of it is wonderful because, it was really interesting because I made a post and one of our guys said something along the lines of, yeah, it's just the great camaraderie and everything that we have at Durable, and that's why we have these great projects and great jobs. And I said, yeah, where else can you work on the coolest places, the coolest job sites with all your buddies and create such great aesthetics, having a great time doing it and getting well paid at the same time. And he's like, you just can't. He's like, and he was saying how He's been approached so many times by other companies promising the sun, moon, and stars, and he goes, "Why would I ever go anywhere else?" He goes, I've literally traveled the world with my best buddies doing the most incredible jobs." And he's just like, it almost wouldn't matter what the money is because I have the money I need, and I get to do all this cool stuff, and there's no there's no reason for me to even look anywhere else. And that's kind of what you establish when you hire the right people for your company. Everybody's company's got a different brand, different vision. And if you can hire people that want to be a part of that brand and that vision, well, they're going to fit in your team. It's just like a sports team. If you look at American football team, some teams they're organized to move fast. They're a high gear passing offense, et cetera, et cetera. And then others are, they slow the game down. They, they work things different. And each of those teams, they have to select the players that will fit into that team. Just because you're a superstar at Durable, you might go to another team and it might be not good. And vice versa. You can be a superstar at some other company, come over here, and maybe it's not a fit, you know? And so you've got to bring in the right people for your team and nurture that and really get the best out of everybody.
Okay. That is a great thing. And I believe that if you are an artist and if you are clear about your vision and if you know that what kind of brand or organization you want to create, I think nature guides you as well. Let's just go like 20 or 30 or 40 years back when you were starting out in roofing, and you told me that you were doing your economics degree, and then everything is happening, and everyone in the roofing industry, I feel now, can say that you are clearly an artist who is obsessed with doing the best quality work. Now, if back in time we go in the 90s and the 80s, I think that guys like you who are artists, they believe that life is a marathon, not a sprint. Like, that at the end of this, there will something that will happen and that will reward me for my efforts, the quality of work that I am doing. I will get a reward for this. And most of the time, the reward is not monetary, it is the recognition that you achieved something that the world is taking benefit from. But a lot of times you mentioned that if you are an artist, then maybe you should have someone else who goes out there and who brings you the jobs so you can do your part. Let's just say I find you 30 or 40 years back and I tell you that, okay, I want to be part I want to partner with you, and you will be the artist and I will be the person who gets the jobs or who just communicates. How would you identify that if this opportunity is the right time to collaborate, or you just have to be on your own path and just wait for the right moment?
Well, that's an interesting thing. You've always got to keep your eyes open. That's the thing. It's like when you're out there working, sometimes things aren't a fit just because of timing. And sometimes the timing just happens to work out. A good example of that would be Bain and Irvine. We were never looking for a company to buy. We overheard a conversation that Graham had with somebody, and he was talking about having some difficulties selling his company, and that, he wanted to sell it to somebody that would maintain that integrity that they had and maintain that great reputation that they had. Graham's great grandfather had this huge roofing company that installed literally all of the most fabulous roofs in all of Scotland, Edinburgh at least. I shouldn't say Scotland, Edinburgh. You're talking about like Fettes College and these iconic buildings. And when Gary and I overheard that, we're just like, huh, well that's kind of interesting, because we've never thought about buying a company, but especially one abroad. But just the timing of that and how it all fit, we're just like, it's worth looking into. And we looked into it and it all fit. So the main thing is just keeping your eyes open of opportunities that are available. And that's how we've gotten certain people working within our company and how we've gotten certain jobs or even opened certain offices. Just the timing of everything just kind of worked out that way. And so if you just kind of keep your eyes open, watch, listen, and communicate, you can kind of navigate yourself through the morass of business much easier. Because again, that's one of the reasons why I try and talk to so many people all over the US or all over the world about what we do and what they do. And because you never know when an opportunity might arise. Way back in our early days, when all we did was slate and we used to subcontract our sheet metal work. Well, the guy that we subcontracted to, Herman Jeffries, he had a company called Herman Jeffries Sheet Metal, and he did all of our sheet metal work. One day, Herman just said, "Hey, I've got an idea." And we're like, "What's that?" He goes, "How about if I just close my business down and I come work for you guys?" And we're like, "Well, how would that work?" He's like, "I just hate dealing with people. I'm chasing money down, trying to sell jobs. When I sell jobs, I'm not on the job. So, sometimes, the guys, they go off and do something else." And so he's like, if I just got rid of my company and all I had to do was work on the job and I'd always have my guys with me, nobody'd make any mistakes and I wouldn't have to worry about selling jobs or, licensing and permits and paying taxes and, all of that other stuff. So, we're because we were really new at the time. We're like, "Yeah, but you have all that equipment." He goes, "How about if I just lease it to you?" So we worked out this whole thing, and that was back in, gosh, 1990.
Mhm.
So all of a sudden, we had four really great sheet metal guys, and two of them are still with us. Herman's son is still with us, and another guy that worked for Herman, they're still with us today. It's just like I said, you kind of keep your eyes and ears open for opportunities. And when they present themselves, you've got to go, okay, well, will this fit? Or is it going to take me down a rabbit hole? Because we've had all kinds of those too. I can't even tell you how many people have offered to sell us companies. Oh, well, you could expand to this geographical area, or oh, I've got all these great flat roofers. We do EPDM and TPO. We can just slide in there under durable and, all these various ideas. And no, none of those were any good. And we didn't do those. But, you know, Bain and Irvine, yes. Herman Jeffries, yes. You've got to keep your eyes open to really just jump on something when it avails itself.
I think that is a beautiful answer. And the other thing about this is that at times, even if you get an opportunity and someone gives you their legacy, then you have to preserve this as well. And you have to make sure that the integrity always stay alive. And that brings me to something that, John, what does comes to your mind when you hear the word preservance?
Preserving? Well, basically to maintain the historic integrity of it and make sure that it lasts for however long it should. And what we usually like to do is we like to a lot of times take a look at see how something failed and make it that much better. So I'll give you an example of that. So St. Anne's church in Roanoke, they had their twin steeples. They started to list, and what that means is they were kind of going like this, drifting out of plane. They were slanting. We had to figure out was what was going on with that. So when we got up there, termites were eating some of that wood. So to fix it, what we actually had to do was we had to erect scaffolding up the twin towers, and we chopped off the steeples and we craned them down, and we had to fix a lot of the masonry because all that water had gotten in down to the masonry base and deteriorated it. And then we dropped I-beams, steel I-beams into the steeple to make it stronger. And we had new steeples constructed from steel. And so basically, when they got reattached, they were much, much stronger than the old wooden steeples. And then we clad them in wood and we put the exact same slate, exact same design, copper, everything back up. But what we realized was that this church that sits on a hill and the steeples were, I believe they were 150 feet tall or something, 175 feet tall, and it gets incredibly windy up there. So when they're built with wood, they start to sway, and the copper will tear and gets water in, and then you have all that damage. So we did several things to preserve it to make it last much longer. So since the structure was not wood, it didn't sway as much. It was much more rigid. And then when we put the copper on, we put stainless steel at the top on the crosses. And so the crosses are now rigid. And then instead of using 20-ounce copper that was soldered, we installed 40-ounce copper. So it was actually a little bit thicker than 40 ounce. So it's more than double the thickness. And then we welded it. So, solder is good, but it's nowhere near as strong as a weld. So when we welded everything, not only does it look perfect, I mean, it looks original, but it's much, much stronger because of the steel, the stainless steel, the 40-ounce copper, the welds. So that's one of the things that we like to do is that when we take something apart, we like to look at it and see, how did it fail? Why did it fail? And change it so that those failures don't reoccur. If you look at our project in Logan County Courthouse in Lincoln, Illinois, it won the IFD International Award for sheet metal. And, people were asking us questions about it. And I said, well, that roof kept failing, again and again and again and again. And what the main problem was is that those clocks are huge. There's these 4 clocks on it, one on each side. They're about 13 feet in diameter. And so in the past, what everybody was doing was they were installing the copper, soldering around the whole thing, and then it looks beautiful. The only problem with that is that copper moves a lot. So it gets
Hmm.
hot, it gets cold. That copper expands, contracts, expands every single time the solder joint breaks. So instead of doing something like that, we put in a pleated valley, which means that the copper is all folded and it's not soldered. It's all locked together. So it kind of looks like an accordion. So when it gets hot, it stretches out. And when it gets cold, it shrinks back. So that accordion allows it to move without tearing and breaking. So, we use European techniques, European folds on all of this. So now it's a much, much longer lasting product. And so when you get these really old buildings and you can see why it failed, you can just kind of look at it and go, okay, well, it failed because of this after, 100 years. Well, what if we solve that one problem? Maybe it can last, 150 years or however long. But there's certain reasons why it failed, like steeples, sometimes they'll put them on without any idea of how windy it gets or the type of material they're using. Our very first steeple that we did in Columbus, Ohio, St. Mary, there was this steeple and slates started falling, and they have a school there. So they were really nervous, and we erected netting all around it to catch all the slates that were falling. And then we came up with an idea of how to put a slate roof on that will last way longer. We got rid of the Pennsylvania slate that only lasts, about 75 or 100 years. And we use Buckingham slate, which lasts hundreds of years, 300 plus. And we affixed it in such a way that the slates can't come off. And then we did some things with the copper also. So now you've got a steeple that will last hundreds of years rather than just 75. And so when we do these old historic projects, we like to look at it and see, well, what worked and what failed. The same goes with our project in Helena, Montana. It's a clay tile roof, Ludowici tile. The tile is a great tile. Ludowici's got the hardest tile in the world. I mean, it's got the lowest absorption rate of any clay tile in the world. So, but that doesn't help when it gets blown off, and that's what happened. You had 100-mile-an-hour winds, and tiles were blowing off. So we came up with the hurricane clips and a way to install all of that tile back on without it having any problems. And there were some other issues too, because what happened was they had structural damage, both from an explosion and an earthquake way back in the day. So we also went in there with stainless steel ties, and we cinched the whole thing together so that it's much more rigid, so it's not so susceptible to storms. And that's, again, one of the things that we really like to do. We like to look at is like, what caused this failure and how do you fix those issues while keeping all of the good points? The good points being the Ludowici clay tile, the copper, nice structure that they use, the gold leaf on the cross. We did all of that. Well, actually, no, the gold leaf was even better. I forgot. The old gold on the crosses was paint. So the paint was coming off. So we used a really, really thick gold leafing on there so it would last a really, really long time instead of just paint. So, when you take a look at a historic project, we always like to go back with what's original. So it looks just like it always did, but better. How can we make the things that failed not fail?
I see that a lot of people these days, or a lot of contractors, what they do is that they do not keep that thing in the original condition, and it is because it is easier to fix that fault or to find the root cause of what is actually causing the trouble than to just destroy everything and make it from scratch. And the client or the customer, he or she is in a vulnerable position, and whatever solution you will propose, they have to choose it because now they are trusting you with their money and with their roof, or with their house, or with their historical building maybe. So do you feel that it is about the mindset as well, like earlier when you were saying that the mindset of today's generation has changed, and now when you are sitting, you are talking about preserving the thing in that original condition, so it looks like exactly the same on the front end, but the back end is even more improved and enhanced. But someone who is like in their 40s or in their 30s, and the person that we were discussing about before, he or she might not think like that. And that a reason that we don't see like many things like we used to see a few hundred years back, because now everyone comes and they want to create buildings that may look good, but they lack aesthetics, and they don't, like, anyone can look at a building or a sculpture and we feel that okay, it is a massive one, but we do not feel that connection with that thing because someone might have not paid the attention or the right mindset to preserve that thing.
Well, sure. I mean, you've got to look at the reasons why. I mean, so a lot of times when I look at some of these old buildings, I'm in awe of the artistic work, of the craftsmanship, of the details, and all of that. And I want to jump in there and restore that and make it last for longer than it's been around. And that's our mindset. Another person's mindset might be, well, I I don't wanna have any issues. I wanna make it easy. So, I wanna do the least amount of work. Or another guy might be, "Hey, the bottom line is the bottom line. I don't have guys that can do that, so I'm gonna bid this instead." So I can maximize my profit. A homeowner or a building owner, they've got to basically select the contractor that best fits what they want to achieve in that building. And maybe they want to go cheap also. And a lot of times, this is the funny thing that some people don't realize is that we'll go up to jobs and we'll just say, yeah, we're not your contractor. I've had guys say, "Yeah, I'm doing this, I'm just looking for the low price," and I'm like, "Well, we're not going to be that. So you should just hire somebody else. And we don't have any problems just walking away from a job if it doesn't fit us. Whereas I think a lot of people, they're trying to grab every single job they can. And you should really just focus on what you want to do and what you're great at. And if you do that, you'll really blow up. If you're like a really great shingle guy, you shouldn't actually be trying to go after the old historic work on the slate and the tile, because that's not what you're good at. Sure, it might look cool in a LinkedIn post or whatever, but that's going to take you away from what you're good at. And you really shouldn't do that. And it's like you should find what you like to do, what your niche is, and just jump in on that and really learn everything about that you can. So, I've had people ask me certain things about like shingles or EPDM or whatever. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know anything about that, or I know about this much. So you should ask somebody else. And I don't actually really try and learn that because it's not anything that we do. I've had people ask us, to do a shingle roof for them. It's like, yeah, you did my house. I've got this rental property. Can you do the shingles? I'm like, no. And they're like, well, we love you guys. Can't you just give us a price? Like, no, you don't do it. You want to put slate on? Great. Tile? Great. Copper? Great. But we're not going to do a shingle roof. You just have to hire somebody else. And it just falls outside of what we want to do. And I think too many people are trying to, I don't know, do too much. And if you really just concentrate on what you're good at, those people will find you, because that's now your brand. That's now your company. That's what it stands for. And people will seek you out. But if you try and do like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, whatever you can get your hands on, you probably don't get very good at it because you're doing something different all the time. And then B, you've got no real branding. It's like, who are you? So that becomes difficult and it's not just roofing, it's any business. Any business has a brand that they should be working on. If you're, gosh, a chiropractor, well, you could specialize in sports injuries. You could specialize in auto accidents. You could specialize in nutrition. There's so many different things that you can specialize in, and people will come to you and you're that guy. I've got a friend of mine, Eric Berg, who's a really well-known chiropractor, but he does overall health, like, nutritional supplements and keto and all this stuff. And he doesn't actually practice anymore. Gosh, he's so knowledgeable. He's incredible. I've got another friend of mine, another chiropractor, guy I used back when I used to live in New Orleans. He works on a lot of sports figures, NFL, NBA, because he really knows how to work a body when it's been mangled. So, yeah, I remember the very first time I saw him, I was like way out of whack. I just moved like this whole truckload of wood by myself. And I was just like, I can barely move. And, can you fix this? Because I went to another chiropractor and all she did was make it hurt more. And Rob started working it, and he goes, wow, you're really locked up. And I said, yeah, I guess you can't do anything, huh? He goes, oh. He goes, no. He goes, I move 300-pound linemen. He goes, I can move this. And he did these wild techniques. And man, my back just, was ripped, and I was just laying there. My gosh. I'm like, I've never heard noises that loud from my back. But he fixed it. And like I said, if you're a dentist, maybe one guy does cosmetic dentistry, one person does kids or whatever. Work within your niche and create a really solid brand out of it. And if you're really good at that, people will seek you out. I've had people ask me how we work all over the place. Like, I saw your project in Montana and Colorado. It's like, you advertise out there? How do you advertise? It's like, what advertise? I'm like, They find us, it's like when you got a difficult historic project, we're the guys to call and they'll find us. It's because that's who we are. And that's one of the problems that a lot of people run into with business is that they're just trying to get as much business as possible and they'll take this or that or anything else. And it's like, no, just tell them to go away. It's like, this is what you do and that's it.
This is something that I learned this year as well, that you cannot be everything to everyone. You can be
Correct.
just something to someone. And if you do that, the right person will find you. And even if you are lowering your target audience or the market size that you want to serve, but now you are addressing the needs of these people that you want to serve way better than just chasing everyone. And you were you said that that you are known for preserving these historic projects, and if someone wants to do that, he or she should call you because you have made an identity like that. Do you feel, John, that this is something that gets reflected in our relationships as well? Like, people nowadays, we think that everything we can make new, and if a relationship is having some bad days, we will not repair that. We are just looking for a new relationship because it is easier to find a new one instead of taking responsibility and trying to fix that.
Sure, that reflects in a lot of different companies too. I know this one company that I'm not going to say the name. They advertise a lot, and they spend so much money advertising. I was just blown away. I was talking to the owner, and he goes, "Yeah, because what happens is you get some bad jobs, and they'll never hire you again. But if you just keep your name out there in everybody's face, you'll just keep on getting new clients, even if you've got all these bad ones stacked up, because your continual promotion will outcreate the bad jobs you did." And I was just like, wow, that's an interesting idea. It worked for them. They were, and they still are, a very large company that does a lot of work. And not all of their work is bad. I'm just saying that they get some bad projects and they don't turn back. They're just like, okay, we'll see ya. And they're just focused on the next one, the next one, the next one. Everybody's got their own way of doing it, but you've got to look at what works for you.
Okay. And speaking of that, I think that a lot of people nowadays or in construction, we see that a lot of projects or owners rely on speed only. Like, I feel that speed has become the only factor that is the core behind the performance of a project, or if we have to judge anything, speed is the only thing that we can use to judge a project or to judge someone's performance. It can be speed of installation, speed of closing the deal, speed of anything. And that rush mentality, do you feel that that kind of ignores the quality part as well, and it kicks the quality out of the equation because everything is so much focused on speed? And I don't know if it is right or wrong, but you are someone who has so many years of experience. Do you feel that speed values so much in a project that we should not look at other variables as well?
That's a good question. And it's something that you grow up with here in the United States. If you go over to any country in Europe or even the Far East, things don't move as fast. If you go to a restaurant or go to a store and ask for something, here in the US, we expect things immediately. And it's a mentality here in the US that speed wins all the time. And speed does win sometimes. Yes, let's say a person calls up 5 companies, and the first one out there sells the customer so well that they just sign on the spot, and the other 4 guys, they're out of luck. And that happens. So speed definitely does play into things to a certain degree. You've got projects where they have a certain timeline and it has to be done in a speedy fashion, or you get penalized. We had that Norwegian embassy project where you're talking about $5,000 a day penalty for going over. After it was all said and done, We had all these bidders and they put in different things and bidders fell out and we became their only bid because we were the only ones willing to sign a contract with that heavy of a demand. And that was one of the things that they asked is like, "Are you sure you can do this? Because everybody else says it's impossible." And I said, "Well, that's why you guys called us in because we do the impossible." And it's just kind of funny because I've heard so many customers say that. It's like, "Well, I'm basically calling you because, I've been told that you do those impossible projects." It's like, "Well, we've got an impossible project. And so working through those things is really vital, but speed is vital on certain things, but I think a lot of times there's too much of an emphasis on the speed, meaning that you've got to get the product first. It's great that you can do it fast, but can you actually get the actual product done correctly? And that goes to where I think a lot of people don't know what they're looking at as far as quality because there's not really a standard or enough standards. If you go over to Europe, there are certain standards. The French have their standard. The UK has their standard. The Germans, they have their standard. You can't really deviate. Here in the US, gosh, people are doing things in all different kinds of ways. A couple of weeks ago, I looked at this roof in Baton Rouge, and nothing was laid out correctly. They broke all these different accepted U.S. standards, but they're not really well known. It's like the National Slate Association has their standard, but it might be a little different than the Slate Roofing Contractors Association, which is a little bit different than the National Roofing Contractors Association, which is a little bit different from the international code. But on that job, they even broke the international code, so it's like it was a code violation. So they didn't even know that, but they did it fast. They did it really fast and cheap. But in the long run, it's not really cheap. So yeah, you get those situations, and I think part of it, like I said, is here in the U.S., everybody is so used to the speed, the McDonald's, the Starbucks, the this, the that. Like I said, you go over to Europe, a lot of countries, say like in France, it's not Starbucks. You sit down, they're making the coffee, but it's not fast. Here in the US, you got a little bit of that mentality spilling over into the trades and just in life in general. So speed is probably a little overemphasized here in the US.
Thank you for that answer. And I agree with you because I don't see that happening in like people from other countries that I meet. Like, I feel that people lack calmness in the States, and a lot of it goes down to the hustle culture that is everywhere around people in the States. And that hustle culture is now maybe turning into a war or a battleground kind of mentality where everything, even in the workplace or at home, is like a war. You are fighting a constant battle with yourself, with your goals, or maybe something else. And everything looks, because that looks good on social media, that looks good on team meetings, that you are the person who talks about endurance, you are the person who talks about hardships, and you just talk about constantly keeping yourself in a struggle mode. But I believe that calmness is something that induces creativity, because if you are not calm, you will never be creative. So do you feel that this war kind of mentality, or this battleground, or this hustle culture, that, or this speed oriented mentality that everyone has around in the States, can actually be fatal in the coming years?
It's a tough thing. It's like different countries have their own different ways that they go about things. If you think about the United States, it's like rather than acquiescing to the UK and their taxes and whatnot, they fought against them and they became their own nation and they're so individuated and it can be good in a way, but it's bad in a way. So you want to have a happy medium because in that, like you were saying, in that speed, in that push, in that drive to keep up with the Joneses and have the I don't know, the cool watch or the cool vacation or the cool clothes, whatever, to flash on the social media like, hey, check out my new Breitling watch, and I'm sitting on a beach here in the Bahamas or wherever, and I'm in this beautiful I don't know, house and toes in the sand and whatever. And it's this thing of I've got to keep up with the Joneses. And I think that's one thing that pushes people maybe over the edge. And we talked about drugs earlier. It's like they've got to escape from it all. And you're right. I think that people have to be able to just calmly sit there and figure out, what to do and whatnot. And I've always thought that when you have something horrific happen to you in life, the best thing to do is just stop and just go, okay, so this is the current scene. So how do I take this current scene to my ideal scene? And what are the steps that I need to do to get there? I think what happens usually is, oh my gosh, this happened, that happened. I don't know what to do. And they kind of go crazy. But like I said, this might sound counterintuitive, but it's not. If you just stop as if time stood still and just said, okay, wow, this is really a horrible thing. I've got this thing here. Okay, so ideally I'd like to look like this over here. Okay, so to go from this to this, okay, let's see, what are the steps to get there? I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do this. Okay, let me write that down. Okay, now I've got to carry this out so I can get it to my ideal scene. And because when you kind of jump in without doing it, all your thoughts are irrational. So you're compounding the problem whenever you get a problem. And so it gets to be like this snowball, and a lot of people crash and burn when something bad happens. And I almost kind of look at it as, this is a really good test for you. It's like, okay, well, this happened. How are you going to be the hero to navigate it to a big win? How are you going to come up with the bright ideas and the correct solution to get it to where you're like, yeah, because everybody's going to have those bad situations come in life. And when you don't calmly just go, okay, well, I'm going to have to fix this. I'm going to have to stand up, figure it out. And these are the steps I'm going to take. And if you don't do that, you crash and burn. And I think that's really what makes a person, because when you can do that again and again, it was kind of like what I was saying before about happiness. Like, that's what makes a person happy, when they can overcome those obstacles that get in the way of their life so that they can have the end result that they want. Well, once you've overcome that, you're like, yeah, you're happy. So to me, figuring out problems like this is really kind of what makes me enjoy life. Like I said, hanging out on a beach, sipping a martini or whatever with my toes in the sand. Yeah, that's great for a day, half a day, whatever. But it's not really a way to live life for me.
Okay, I just have three more questions for you, John, and that is actually a really deep answer. And I remember a clip where I saw Bruce Lee, like it's a scene from a movie. I don't know which movie it is, but I saw it on Instagram. And what happens is that Bruce Lee is going somewhere, and then all of a sudden he has a wall behind him and a wall ahead of him. Now he can't go back and he can't go forward as well. So immediately what he does is that he sits down on the ground calm, and he does not do anything. He does not try to push the wall or fight it or anything, and he just waits. And later on, when the villain of that movie, the walls are just pushed down, and he starts to fight with him, and he tells his friend that the reason he did not try to push the walls is because no matter what he tries, he's not gonna able to fight that, and the only thing that he can do is that preserve his force, so that when the right moment comes, he has the force and the energy to fight the villain or to fight the person that has to be fought in order to win this battle, instead of wasting his energy on these walls that are just a mere distraction. So if you sit down, I think you can see that if it is just a distraction or if it is the actual problem that I should be fighting. And thank you so much for that answer. Speaking of this, John, you mentioned about happiness and fun. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned that in the beginning that a lot of people now, you assume that they know what you know as well, and that is a point where the gap or the like emptiness takes place. There is an assumption and there is a gap in communication because you assume that the other people know this thing as well. And I think that happens when you become master of something, because now you are assuming that everyone else knows this too. So does this mastery isolate you, and do you feel isolated at times because not so many people can understand you?
Not really, because really what I do is whenever somebody doesn't understand, I explain it. And what I've noticed recently was I seem to be explaining a lot of the same things again and again and again. So that's why I said I've started to make videos. And especially, like I said, on some of my inspections, like what I see, um, what caused it, or what are the differences in the slate or the tile, what so that way it's a visual thing of, this is what he's talking about. And it's funny because now looking back, I wish, but back then we didn't have the technology that we have today, but I wish that when I was doing the tear offs, I could have done that. I could have like, okay, well, you see how this chimney flashing was made, and this lasted 80 years. And then I could go, this is another chimney flashing, same roof pitch, same slate. This lasted 100 years, and this is why. They did this instead, and that would have been really good. But hindsight's 2020. And back then I had no idea. I had no idea of the value of that. A lot of people ask how I know so much about roofing. It's like, I've torn off probably 1,000 roofs, maybe even more, between slate and tile and sheet metal. And it's like, when you tear them off, you see every single imperfection of what caused the leak. And you, because every roof is installed differently, and you get to see little nuances, and like, oh wow, that was an ingenious way to overcome blah. And so, yeah, and I guess why I said that sometimes you forget that people don't know this is that throughout the year we've put out memos on this or courses on this or whatnot. But there have been a lot of guys that have stayed with us, but there's also a lot of turnover, and there's also the growth. I mean, back in the when I started, there was only a handful of us. So even in the early 90s, there's what, a couple dozen people. You expand to our size, even though there's still a lot of people here from the old days. Well, not everybody is, and then sometimes they'll forget what you said. Somebody will say, "Hey, I remember a long time ago you told me about blah. Can you repeat that? Can you tell me what that is?" And so that's where knowledge gets lost a little. So that's going to be one of my main things that I'll be working on over the next couple years, is probably doing a full hatting of between courses and videos and pictures, so that I can document all the different types of slate, the different types of tile, what occurs in unusual conditions. I mean, a lot of the things that I think are basic, people don't know. Like I was actually just talking with Deanna yesterday. I said, "What?" I was like, "When water freezes and turns to ice, it expands by 4%." And she looked at me. She says, "What?" I said, "Well, yeah, it expands." I'm like, "You don't know that?" She's like, "No." She said, "How would I know that?" I said, "Well, it's just, I thought it was kind of common knowledge. You get water, and just look at it. Once it freezes, it expands by 4%." Uh, and she's like, I don't think anybody knows that. And I was just like, oh. And so I was just kind of thinking that That's one of those little things that you need to talk about, or the different types of metals. Metals interact with each other in different ways. For instance, the copper and steel, they don't jive. That steel rust, or copper and aluminum, and there's a nobility scale to all your metals. Those are some of the things that I have to put either in writing or in videos of all these different things that I've talked about over the years, and I just kind of assumed that everybody within the company knew that. Or like underlayments, your old underlayments, they were made with cotton, linen fiber, horsehair, and true asphalt. Today's paper it's junk. It's paper and it's refined asphalt. They've taken out all kinds of different things for solvents like benzene and whatnot, and the asphalt's junk now. So it's just a different animal. So I think I have to go back and explain a lot of these technical things that they're widely known within our company, and so that the knowledge doesn't get lost.
I think that maybe in the coming years, the position where people are at these days or this time, I think they might not be able to value the knowledge as well. And what I mean by that is that, does it bother you at times when you feel that the future generations might not be able to value your work or understand your work or the quality of work that you wanted them to achieve, and they would not be able to do that because that wouldn't be their priority?
I would say that it's going to be rough in general for society, simply because there's a lack of qualified people in the trades, whether it be roofers or electricians or plumbers or whatever. There's not enough people in the trades. But as for us, as far as getting people to learn, I don't think that's an issue. This is kind of interesting because I saw this Facebook post about ICE and how they're rounding up people, and how somebody was lamenting that now he can't get a project done because not his whole crew, but I think like 70% of his crew got taken away, and now he's stuck and he can't finish this job. And he was really bitter about it. And I probably made a comment that maybe I shouldn't have. I just said, well, you should just hire legal people. And some of the comments that came back at me were, well, that's impossible, and I'm thinking, well, we have 140 some odd people. We don't have one person that's illegal, and it is possible, but it's become impossible because so many people have hired illegals, and the previous government allowed so many of these illegals in, has flooded the market. And so what you've got is you've got a compound problem. So you've got employers that are taking advantage of illegal immigrants. So they're underpaying them. They don't have health care, and they're treated almost like glorified slaves because they know they have them, meaning that, what are you going to do? Quit? I can treat you as bad as I want and pay you less than what anybody else will pay. And so you've got these people that are a lot of times very hardworking, but they know they're being taken advantage of. So how hard and how well do you think they're going to be doing the work? Not very. So the quality's bad. So, and then the wages are low. So guys that would go into the trade aren't going into the trade because the wages are too low. So you've got this whole huge compound problem of the pricing being too low, the wages being too low, the individuals doing the work, doing careless, half-ass work because they know they're being taken advantage of. And you've got this huge issue, whereas if people drew the line and said, no, I'm not hiring anybody that's illegal, that would put a strain on the business in the roofing industry. Prices would go up. You could hire more legal people. The government would actually see the issue and go, hey, I tried to get a new shingle roof on, and last time I got a price, it was $21,000. Now here a year later, it's $45,000. I can't get anyone to do it for less than $45,000. Mr. President, we need to do something. So it would create such a stress that legislation would have to change. And, I see all the different sides in this, people arguing against ICE and saying it's inhumane. And yes, it is, but you're contributing to that problem as an employer that hires those kinds of people because you are underpaying them. You are definitely underpaying them. And you're making money off of their misery, and if you really drew the line and pushed the problem and made the government see that, legislation will change because it's like this. Nobody here in the US was originally here except the American Indian. So the United States is a melting pot of all of these great people from all over the world. And I think that it should be done legally. If you shut off the borders, got rid of all of your criminals, and started allowing the hardworking people that haven't been here legally to find a way to actually be here. So let's say you find them for coming over illegally and for working under the table, but you gave them a pathway to a green card or citizenship, saying, if you stay here, we will give you, temporary status for 7 years. And if you pay these fines and pay these back taxes and you keep your nose clean, well, after 7 years or whatever, you'll have a green card. And after so many years, you can be a citizen. Then it leads to production rather than just deporting people randomly that are actually helping our country. A lot of these immigrants, illegal immigrants, are actually helping our country to a degree. But I would say that the employers that are hiring these illegals are compounding the problems heavily, and they're just looking out for their own pocketbooks. I can't hire anybody. That's not true. If you upped your wages, you could hire somebody. And they say, well, I can't sell a job. Well, if you up the price of your job, it all works. It all works. But when you go down to the lowest common denominator and go, well, I can't do anything about it. Well, yeah, you're going to wind up in that position. And that's actually when you fail, is when you think nothing can be done about it. When you decide that something can be done, you can do something about it. I kind of laugh about people who talk about being underprivileged and I'm not a rich white guy, and so I need these handouts. And that's totally false. I've always thought that being at a disadvantage is an advantage. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. My parents moved here a couple months before I was born. And when I grew up, I spoke Chinese. So when I went to school, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what Little League was. People are talking about the Bible. I don't know what the Bible is. I remember after first grade, I had to go to summer school because nobody could understand me. I had to take speech classes because I talk so funny. So, and, like I said, we grew up really poor. All my clothes got mailed here from Hong Kong and they didn't fit. And, everybody made fun of the clothes I wore. But I kind of look at it as that's an advantage. It's not a disadvantage because you can kind of start to see what ideal scenes are and where you're at. And you get to go, okay, well, I'm like way far off of my ideal scene. So I've got to take a look at the steps I need to take to get to my ideal scene because, wearing these funky clothes, not knowing how to ride a bike or what everybody's talking about, everybody's talking about, the pro football teams, and you're like, what's that? So, um, trying to get assimilated into society, um, when you're kind of like off the beaten path, it allows you to look and you go, okay, well, wow, these people have a nice house. Wow, you get to see what a better scene is or an ideal scene, and you get to go, okay, well, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. I remember thinking, gosh, we're so poor, we can't afford anything. So, my brother and I got a paper route when we were young. So we could buy stuff, we could get bikes and, just whatever, like what normal kids had. And it's like, if you think about like a sports team, like I said, let's say you're a football team and you're, 3 touchdowns behind. Well, a lot of time you see these huge comebacks because the coach, the quarterback, all the players, they go, okay, so we've got to do this to get back into the game. So, and they do it, right? And why and how do they do it? It's because they look at it and they're calm about it, and they can say, well, the reason why this team is up on us is they've been doing these plays and we've been vulnerable. So if we stop doing these, we'll stop them from scoring. They keep stopping us because they're lined up in a way that we can't run the ball. Well, we're going to throw it over their heads. Okay. And now they just came back and they won the game. Why? Because they were backed up and they were able to just sit down for a second and go, I'm in a terrible position. I'm about to get blown out of this game and everybody's going to laugh at. But what are the ways that we have with what we have available to us that will pull off this game? And you do this, 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 and this. Let's do it. Let's roll as a team and make it happen. And they win. And so, like I said, it's like, I kind of chuckle sometimes when people talk about how they've been disadvantaged and this and that, and they need this handout and that handout. And it's like, if you keep taking these handouts, you're going to go nowhere and you're just going to be a bum not achieving anything in life. But on the contrary side, if you look at it and go, wow, I'm in a bad position. Okay. Well, I want to be over here. I've got to figure out and write myself a program of how to get to where I want to be. And if you just follow that program and keep at it, that's another thing. You can't falter and you can't quit. And you just keep at it, you'll eventually get to where you want to be.
Thank you for actually giving me that answer, because I agree and I can relate to this so much, that being of disadvantage is actually an advantage. Like, just like you, I am from Pakistan, and if someone is in the United States, I feel at times that he has to maybe dedicate 1 hour, but I have to dedicate 10 hours to learn so many different things about the people in the United States. So I can stay in the loop, and it is so easy for them to kick me out, but I have to make myself so irreplaceable that anyone cannot replace me because of the value that I bring. And that is something that pushes me to actually do the best work, or to learn so many things that about American culture, or about the people that I have to interact with, just like you. And I could easily sit down there and think of it like I am in a third world country where we don't have any advantages like you guys do, and I could have sit down just at a desk job. But I agree with you that if being of disadvantage is actually an advantage if you look at it the right way. Thank you for that answer. I think so that we already had quite an extensive conversation, so I won't stretch this further. My last question to you, Joan, is, as we are heading towards the end of this interview, I want to know about the awards and certifications process, because you are someone, or your company, you receive a lot of awards and a lot of recognition for the work that you do. So maybe there are guys out there who want to know that how does all of these things happen? Like, do you apply for these awards? And if you have a process, or if you apply for these awards, or then what are the common awards that someone should keep in their mind? And if there isn't an applying process, the awarding authority, they choose the projects, then how do they choose you, and how do you come under the spotlight?
All the awards are pretty different. You've got the NRCA Gold Circle Award. If you're an NRCA member, they usually send an email out asking for submissions. I think the first awards we got were the Central Ohio Craftsmanship of the Year awards, and those were through the Builders Exchange, and they do the same thing. They all these different associations, they send out emails. So like the latest one, that Coupa project, Coupa Slate sent us an email saying, hey, do you have any projects that you would like to submit for an award? And so, that's what I was saying, as far as like that organizing board of the divisions, we have somebody in public relations, Julie Butler, who she gets these and then she'll do whatever submissions that they.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, John. And it was a pleasure having you on the show today. So, before we sign off, is there any signing off notes or advice that you have, particularly for the roofing industry for the next year, that you can give just in a few lines?
That's something that we're a little bit different on, in that I know that a lot of roofing companies and companies in general, they like to look at market trends and what's happening with the economy and how they're going to prepare for crashes in the economy, or this or that. We've never really done that. Have operate on our own administrative scale and our own targets and goals. And the reason is that when you look at the market or some exterior thing, you become the effect of that. And we always think that it's much better to be in control or cause. So we like to plan for our own expansion and our own steering of the company to make it more viable, more profitable, better in some sense, rather than what's going on in the market. So for me to give advice to other roofers, I don't think I feel qualified to do that, because I'm not a guy that looks at the economy and market trends and says this is where the roofing business is going over the next year or whatever. Yeah, I'm just not that guy. So you should probably ask somebody more qualified than me.
Thank you for your time, John. And I think this is the humble side of yours, because everyone knows that you have got so much to tell and you still feel that you are not qualified. That is the humble side of you. And I think that alone is something that a lot of people, if they can learn this, I think that can be something great for the next year. My prayers are for you for the holiday season and for the upcoming years, for you and for your company and for your family. Have a great time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Bye
All
bye.
right.